My name is Catherine. I'm 24 years old and work at a preschool. Last year, I got married and now live with my husband, George. He's 37 and works for a major corporation, so yes, there's a noticeable age gap between us. Before we got married, George was incredibly attentive and kind. He would always make reservations at wonderful restaurants for our anniversaries and never forgot to buy me a gift. When I was bedridden with menstrual cramps, he'd swiftly buy me painkillers and sanitary products. I appreciated how understanding he was. His maturity and adult-like handling of situations made him all the more attractive to me. However, after we got married, his kindness faded.
What is this terrible tasting food?
Now, such unkind remarks have become common. Before, he would always compliment even my mediocre cooking, but after marriage, he complains about whatever I make. He'd leave my food untouched and start eating food he'd picked up from a convenience store. But I followed the recipe. I think it tastes good. Reacting or replying back would be a major problem. If I showed even a hint of resistance, he wouldn't physically harm me, but he'd yell for hours on end. No matter how much I'd apologize, he'd keep shouting until suddenly it's morning. When this happens, it affects my job, so I've given up on talking back. This is the uneasy piece we've managed to maintain. I'm sorry, I'll cook better next time.
Next time? When is that? You're so incapable. Don't you have any self-awareness as a wife?
I'm sorry. No matter what he says, all I can do is apologize. I believe this is what you would call harassment. People often say you should see the true nature of your partner before marriage, but I failed at that. He used to be so kind. It was too hard to see this coming. His words hurt me daily, but I couldn't entirely give up, hoping he'd return to the way he was before. I couldn't get away from my husband because of these struggles. Then, as if to add insult to injury, I got news from my mom. She had been undergoing cancer treatment for a while, but unfortunately, it spread. It seems there wasn't much more they could do. The doctors gave her a year to live. I was blindsided and devastated. My parents' home is only about an hour drive from where my husband and I live, so I decided to visit my mom as much as possible. My husband didn't seem too happy about it. Every time I'd mention going to see my mom, he'd complain.
You're neglecting our home to see your mother. What are you thinking?
Mom's only got a year left, you know. I want to spend as much time with her as possible, so I don't have regrets.
You think you're being a good daughter? You barely earn anything and can't even do the basics right.
That's a bit harsh, don't you think?
What's that? Got a problem? We live in this nice house because I'm the one earning the money.
We lived in a house bought under my husband's name. Yes, he earned more than I did, but we couldn't buy the house outright, so we took out a mortgage. Before we got married, I offered to help with the mortgage payments. Back then, he sweetly insisted he'd handle it. Look at where that got us now. I might earn less, but I can help with the mortgage too.
This house is under my name. It's my house.
I knew arguing was pointless, so as usual, I just said, I'm sorry. When I apologize, he looks pleased, which I think is the safest way to handle things. After hearing about my mother's condition, I began visiting her more frequently. To not upset my husband further, I made sure to finish all the housework before heading to my parents. Sure, he'd complain, but I'd never talk back. I'd just keep apologizing. I didn't want to risk being banned from seeing my mom. Even after a tiring day, hearing my mother's voice would lift my spirits. Thank you for always coming over. It's nothing. I want to see you. Oh, what if we go on a trip, Mom? I want us to make memories. Oh, that sounds lovely. I agree too. We'll find somewhere close so it won't be too much for Mom. How about we go on your upcoming birthday, Mom? That sounds perfect. I'm all for it. I'm so happy. It'll be the best birthday. Seeing my mother's joyous smile, I felt happiness swell within me too. Her birthday was in 2 months. I decided to start planning for it. On my way home, a particular worry weighed on my mind. How to tell my husband about this trip. Every time I'd go out with friends, I had to report back to him. He would even send multiple emails during my outings, demanding I show him photos of what I was up to. If I ignored him, it led to problems when I got home, so I reluctantly complied. My friends noticed my desperation to take pictures and felt something was off. Isn't that harassment? Harassment? Yeah, being verbally abused, being overly controlled, just like what you're going through. It was then that I realized I was indeed being harassed by my husband. Although knowing didn't change the situation, I read online that it's essential to keep evidence. Since then, I've kept his excessive emails, recordings of his abusive words, and even a diary. I have to report every plan with friends to him. But this time, it's a family trip. Surely he wouldn't control that too. Besides, I've told him about my mother's declining health, so he should understand.
You visited your mother again. Don't you ever get tired of that?
Today, we talked about going on a trip for Mom's birthday. It might be the last one, so we're planning to go. When I told him this, his face immediately soured.
A trip? I didn't hear about this.
We discussed it with the family today.
I never gave permission for that.
It's for Mom. She's looking forward to it. I want to make memories with the family. My husband, clearly irritated, listened to my reasoning, but then a nasty grin crept onto his face.
So, when is this trip?
Just 2 months from today. I've mostly decided on the hotel. I just need to make the reservations.
Wow, in 2 months? Then I guess we can't go.
Why not? With a mischievous grin, my husband started fiddling with his cell phone. A few minutes later, he showed me the screen of his phone, leaving me bewildered.
Look, this is an email from my sister. She's getting married on that day. I've already replied that we'd attend. We can't back out now.
A wedding? I don't remember hearing about that.
I told you before. You just weren't listening. Anyway, no trip. We're going to my sister's wedding. If you don't like it, let's get divorced.
You can't be serious. I had no idea a wedding invitation had arrived. My husband never checks the mail. I always sorted the mail, yet I hadn't noticed that invitation. It's hard to believe I would overlook that. It felt odd that my husband would reply to the invitation himself without consulting me. Seeing my disappointment, my husband looked quite pleased. Growing suspicious of him, I decided to secretly check with my mother-in-law, Mary. Hello, is this Mary? There's something I'd like to confirm. Catherine, what's up? I inquired about the sister-in-law who lives with my in-laws. While my husband is quite the character, this sister-in-law, Elizabeth, is also quite eccentric. She turned 40 this year, a divorced woman, and her divorce story was quite tragic. Elizabeth had a child with her ex-husband, but Elizabeth never really cared for the child. Even though she was a housewife, she did neither household chores nor child rearing, simply lazing around all day. There were times when her ex-husband would come home to find their child crying from hunger. And when the child was just 2 years old, Elizabeth did something unimaginable. During this time, sister-in-law was having an affair with a shady guy from the neighborhood. Unbelievably, she would meet her lover while her child was napping. One day, the child woke up from his nap, realized his mother wasn't there, and cried uncontrollably. The child's cries went on for so long that a neighbor noticed and reported it to the police. That's when they discovered the child had been left alone and about the affair. The husband was furious, immediately sought a divorce. While sister-in-law was obsessed with her lover and splurging the husband's money on him, He dumped her unceremoniously. She wasn't good at parenting, and even her own child disliked her, so she had no chance of getting custody. All that was left for sister-in-law were payments for the compensation to her ex-husband and child support. She returned to her in-laws' home. Soon after, she became reclusive, and that continues to this day. So, it was surprising to think that sister-in-law, who barely goes outside, would get remarried. Is it true Elizabeth is getting married? To my question, mother-in-law looked shocked. What? I never heard that. She doesn't even bathe or go out. And she hasn't even finished paying the compensation. It's impossible for her to remarry. Just as I thought, my suspicion was right. The story of sister-in-law's wedding was a lie concocted by my husband. My husband told me about Elizabeth's wedding. Also, my mom only has a year to live. I wanted to take her on a trip, but he told me not to because it was Elizabeth's wedding day. There's no wedding. I wonder what he's thinking. He even said he'd divorce me if I prioritized the trip over Elizabeth's wedding. Oh, I'm sorry for my foolish son. Please ignore his absurd comments and enjoy your trip with your mother. She'll be delighted. Thank you, I will. I felt relieved knowing mother-in-law is rational, unlike my husband. But at the same time, anger surged within me against my lying husband. Perhaps he just wanted to prevent me from traveling with my mother. After enduring so much harassment, I felt stupid for always complying. I decided to confront my husband. There's something I need to discuss. That night, I talked to my husband again about the trip.
What?
I've decided to go on the trip with Mom.
I told you it's my sister's wedding day. Are you trying to embarrass me?
It's a nice invitation, but my own mother is more important to me. So I can't attend on that day.
Enough of this. Let's divorce. Leave my house right now.
My husband suddenly began to shout, his face distorted in rage. Probably because for the first time, I had resisted and didn't obey him. He started flinging things, like the TV remote and books nearby. I desperately hid behind the couch, ensuring none of the thrown objects would hit me. Suddenly, a voice louder than my husband's rang out of my cell phone.
It's you who needs to stop.
When my husband recognized the voice as that of my father-in-law, Daniel, his face drained of color.
Dad? I've heard it all. A lie about your sister's wedding, threatening Catherine with such deceit and resorting to violence. Unforgivable. I'm on my way. If you harm Catherine in any way, you won't get away with it.
George, upon hearing his father's words, looked completely defeated and crumpled to the floor. He then began to mutter to himself in a hushed tone,
This is bad. No, it's not my fault. They're misunderstanding. I didn't do anything wrong.
Looking at him, I felt more scared than disappointed. Silently, I made my way out of the house. As I crouched by the entrance, my in-laws arrived. Mary! Thank you for helping. After hearing our son's words, I was certain something was off with him. I had shared with my mother-in-law the incident about the trip and my confrontation with my husband. Anticipating potential danger, she had suggested that I let her listen to our conversation over the phone. They informed my father-in-law too, ensuring they were nearby and ready to help if needed.
We're going in to confront our son. If you're feeling up to it, Catherine, join us. We will protect you always.
Daniel's words felt incredibly reassuring. I followed my in-laws back into the house where my husband was.
Hey, the house is a mess. What have you done?
As Daniel entered, my husband looked down in silence.
You claimed it was about your sister's wedding to sabotage Catherine's trip? How pathetic of you. Why did you do such a thing?
My husband mumbled his excuses.
Catherine is so gullible. She listens to everything I say. I'm the one supporting her, yet she dared to stand up to me.
Daniel sighed, clearly exasperated.
Catherine, is my son supporting you financially?
No, I work too, and we split the living expenses. I don't pay the mortgage as he insists on taking care of it, but it's not that I can't afford to. My husband glared at me.
You earn less than me. Don't get cocky.
Yes, that's true, but it's not by much, right? It's not like you're earning that much more than me.
Shut up. You always talk too much. Just listen to me.
He shouted and raged at me. But when father-in-law spoke, he instantly lowered his gaze and became silent.
Don't you feel ashamed? Catherine has been trying so hard to make this marriage work, even with you like this. Catherine, he mentioned divorce earlier. You can really go through with it if you want.
Honestly, I had been waiting for someone to say that. In fact, when I decided to bring up the vacation, I anticipated he'd talk about divorce, so I had the divorce papers with me. Yes, after this incident, I've realized I can't be with him anymore. I want a divorce now, but first, I showed him the record of everything he had done to me up till now. All the things you've done to me, it's been unbearable. I'll consult a lawyer and then proceed with the divorce. Make sure to set aside compensation money, so I don't end up like Elizabeth. The diary entries I kept, the relentless emails, the recording from earlier. Knowing the evidence I had, my husband's face turned pale. He probably realized he stood no chance.
Also, you've requested a transfer to the countryside starting tomorrow. It's the toughest job among all the branches. Work hard there and fix that twisted attitude of yours.
He seemed utterly defeated. He had used his father-in-law's connections to land his job at the company, and with father-in-law holding a higher position, he couldn't refuse. Moreover, because of the transfer, he'd have to give up our house, his pride and joy. He had lost everything in an instant and could only hang his head in defeat. I packed my things that same day and decided to temporarily stay at my in-laws' place. If I suddenly took my belongings and went home, my mother would find out about the divorce. I never wanted her to worry at the last minute, so I never told her about the divorce. Then came my mom's birthday. For this special occasion, we went to the Grand Canyon, a place brimming with nature, to help her rejuvenate. Turns out she visited this place when she was pregnant with me. I remember this place. When I was pregnant with Catherine, every time I dip into a jacuzzi, she'd give me a little tap from inside, like a gentle knock. Seeing my mom reminisce with such joy made me emotional. Look at how you've grown. Thank you for coming into our lives, Catherine. Being able to travel with my mom safely today meant the world to me. We had such a blissful time, just the three of us. Fast forward a year, and it's almost miraculous. My mother is still vibrant and alive. Apparently, the trip had been such a blast for her that she's been brimming with enthusiasm for more. Whether it's because of that or not, her health improved and she became more active than before. Now, once a month, she and my dad go on trips together. She says it's the highlight of her life. With my mom back to her lively self, my dad too seemed more vibrant. I'm truly grateful I took her on that trip. I ended up receiving a substantial settlement from my ex-husband and started living on my own. When I finally told my mom, instead of worrying, she seemed oddly excited. Do tell me all about it. Surprisingly, she was eager to hear about my misadventures, almost like it was a plot from a TV drama. She listened intently to every word. On the other hand, my ex was transferred to a demanding branch office, and apparently works himself ragged every day. The compensation he owed me was initially fronted by father-in-law, but he insisted my ex would work it off no matter what. A few days ago, I received a video message in my inbox sent by my ex. In it, he was tearfully apologizing. But when I listened closely, it was all about protecting his own interests.
I want the settlement waived. Please tell Dad that I want the harassment issue forgiven, and I want to be reinstated to my former position.
Although his coworkers knew about our divorce, they weren't aware of the circumstances. So I forwarded the mail to father-in-law. As expected, father-in-law was furious.
Enough is enough. If you contact Catherine again, I swear it won't be pretty. And if you dare resign, I'll tell every employee about what you did to her.
Given my ex's pride, those words seem to have struck a chord. No matter how exhausted he feels, he's been pushing through at work. Oh well, I hope he finds a way to better himself in this new chapter of his life. I just pray he refrains from making the same mistakes again, especially when it comes to remarrying.